In that day, folks, they made it out of linen. They took rags. Actually, Franklin, his wife, apprentices, would go around the city collecting rags. And eventually there's a paper mill in Philadelphia called the Rittenhouse Mill, and they would produce paper. So it was primarily linen from the flax plant, of course. It was easier to produce in that day. There was some cotton, but it was difficult to process before the advent of the cotton gin. But today, kind of the tables are turned. It's a little cheaper for us to use cotton, which is what this paper is. It's 100% cotton paper. And the scary part of this, folks, the paper company that supplies this printing office with paper today is actually the same paper company that supplies the Bureau of Engraving and Printing with paper, which does our currency. So I'm always suspicious we never get any green ink here. All right, just in case. All right, you don't have to admit it to me, but if you've ever tie-dyed a t-shirt as a kid or a scarf or something like that, you've really done what 18th century printers have done, okay, because they moistened their paper for printing, folks. The idea there, open up the pores, absorb the ink into the fabric, much like if you were tie-dyeing a t-shirt or something like that. So this is going to be slightly wet. When the ink is put on and printed, it's not on the surface of the paper, folks, it's in the paper. Okay, so any of the documents, the things you see that we print here on the counter, these are things that you could actually take to your house, throw them in your sink, rub your hand across the surface, the thing won't run. All right, you don't have to worry about picking up where the paper's going to tear, like the wood pulp stuff we use today. So the paper's slightly moist, we're ready to go. And they were trying to improve these tools, folks. Let's tell, like our students here, these are inkjet cartridges of the 18th century. They realized, hey, if we had a roller, we could really do this quickly. But they also had a problem getting rid of the seams. So their next and best invention were these. They were called beaters. They're just a concave wooden handle, has a little padding inside, folks, with leather covering on the surface. The ink lays on the surface. And I think this is actually one of the first attempts at giving young apprentices some real responsibility in the printing office, because they're asked to assemble these tools. And a good bet is if they've done a good job, these things hold together well through the day and I'm getting good copies, it's probably a good bet that you're going to see that follow along as they advance in their skills. So that sounds pretty sticky, but I'm going to pick up a little more ink. There's a wooden ink tray right alongside the press. I have to duck over here for a second. I always ask people, hey, does this sound like what's coming out of your printer today? If it is, you're going to Best Buy tonight, all right? Yeah, this is pretty sticky, folks. It's linseed oil, tree sap, lampblacker, soot. And Franklin made ink. A lot of his colleagues, a lot of his actually competitors thought, hey, that's pretty good, we'll buy this. But Franklin himself found himself a very good printer, and he said there are people that make better ink today. So he bought his ink from Holland. All right, the same company still supplies ink to this printing establishment today. So he kind of knew what he was buying. So you take these beaters, you apply the ink to the type in this fashion. And since I'm not doing one after the other, folks, I like to take away some time to hopefully give you, when you're done, a good print, and hopefully one will sell here later on, which helps us keep up with the supplies that we use in the shop here. So everything's inked using a tool called the beater, folks. You're beating the ink onto the type. So your job title is you're called the
beater.
There you go, sir. Leave this guy behind, we'll take it. Okay, you're called the beater. We're going to fold our paper down onto the form. We're going to run our carriage onto this wooden block. It's called plat. All right. And then we have to give a hole in this handle, folks. And you can see we've only covered half the page. We don't have the advantage of hydraulics in the 18th century to print a larger piece of paper. So we have to do this again. Roll the carriage under the platen again and give a pull on the handle. So you're pulling on this handle all day long, you must be called the
Puller.
Puller, yeah, you call it.
Too easy.
Yeah. Once like sometimes I watch people who say, "Oh, this must be really some technical term." Right? But it's simple. You just call it the puller. And if you did that job all day, at minimum, folks, you would have pulled on this handle probably 4,000 times, making how many copies?
2,000.
2,000. All right. I'd trick you with a simple math question at the end of the day. Yeah, 2,000. You had to pull twice, right, for each print. And the last part of it is, see what we got here, which is not too bad. Okay, so you can see what we have here. All right, we have some of the sayings that Ben Franklin would fill in little spaces in his almanac with, some funny, some, I guess, that's some pretty good advice. One I like, it's not that one we're printing now, but one I like is good solid advice. He said, hide not your talents, for use they were made. What's a sundial in the shade? Right, and then he did have some funny ones. Okay, 3 can keep a secret. The only way that's going to happen if 2 of them are dead. Right, I had a nephew who got married this past summer. Made him up one, which was good advice. Keep your eyes wide open before marriage. Half shut afterwards. There you go. Yeah, you know the story.
Not that one.
All right. So you can see how it's actually embossed into the paper there, folks. Again, if you like, feel the texture there, but you can see that it's actually embossed. Paper is pretty dry. This would be normally a little more damper. And of course, I think probably everybody recognizes this. Join or die. All right. Most of us, I think, probably the vast majority of us think of this in regards to the American Revolution, encouraging all the states to gather together to fight for their independence alongside allies like France and Spain and Holland. But I'm thinking probably a lot of people don't realize this was used before then. This was actually issued during the French and Indian War initially. Okay, but we reuse it again during the Revolution because it's kind of the same idea. Mm-hmm. So one copy is done, folks. That's the good news. The bad news is if this is the start of the printing day, there's 1,999 more to make.